Podcast on Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
You're listening to The Jan Price Show, and my guest today is award-winning sound designer Julian Slater. Welcome, Julian. Nice to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. I want to start first with, what's your background? How did you become a sound designer?
It was kind of half by design and half by accident. I have always been interested in sound, whether it be music or film or television. Like from a very early age, I guess the embryonic answer to that is I remember distinctly seeing a documentary on the making of Star Wars, and it's like a kind of well-known thing now, which is Ben Burt. You know, how he took elephant sounds and turned them into the sounds of the TIE fighter, and how he kind of, on telegraph poles, he put a mic on the metal wires and hit them with a wrench and got the kind of laser blaster sounds. And I remember that had retrospectively, I can look at it now and understand that had a big impact on me. And then, you know, when I was a young lad of, say, 9 and 10, I would do a lot of kind of cassette-to-cassette editing of music, and I used to listen to the Top 40 show in the UK, and I used to kind of record that and do my own edits of that. And then I originally wanted to get into music, and so when I remember in the UK we have a thing called a careers officer, and I come from almost a village in the rural parts of East Anglia in England, and the career officer said to me, he said to the whole class, he said, now whatever it is you want to do, however outlandish or kind of crazy it seems, lay it on me and I'll try and help you. And I said to him, I want to get into music and I want to be a music engineer. And he kind of looked at me strangely and said, I don't think I can help you with that. However, there's some work experience going at a bank that I can help you with. And so even at that age, I knew that I wanted to do something. So after I left school, I went to a place called the School of Audio Engineering and learnt about the craft of recording bands and live music. And because of that, I then slipped into this world of sound for TV and film. And that was an early age. I first started that at the age of, I think, 20. I had my own post-production facility in London at the age of 21, and on and on and on. But yeah, sound has always been a kind of interesting thing to me, like the how sound affects you and what sound can do to you. So it's always been something that's been in my heart, I would say.
Very fascinating. So how difficult was it for you to move from the recording industry into the film industry?
Well, that's the kind of by accident part. I actually wanted to get into music. I should have added that there was also a seminal moment. I remember the music video for The Police. Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic,
oh, yeah.
And I don't know if you remember it, but they're on
yes,
this big. They're on Montserrat, and you see them on this big mixing desk pushing all these faders. And I thought to myself, that looks cool. I want to do that. And so, part of when I went to the School of Audio Engineering, they have a 2-week kind of work experience where you go off and work in an environment for 2 weeks. And I went to a place called DeWolf Music, and they're the people in London that, you know, if you need to get library music for a TV show or for a game show or for anything, you go to DeWolf Music. And so I worked in the transfer department at DeWolf, where in the old days, you know, that we transfer from 35mm to 35mm or from quarter inch to 35mm. And so I worked there for 2 weeks, and at the end of the 2 weeks, they said, you know what, when you finished your course, if you want to come back and work for us, we'd love to have you. And so that's what I did. I finished my course, and I went and worked in the transfer bay. And then after about 6 or 7 months, I then started sneaking into the effects department, where they used to have all these effects on quarter inch, and people used to come in. And this sounds so antiquated now, and I don't feel like I'm an old veteran, but as I'm saying this to you, it sounds so antiquated. But clients used to come in and say, I'd like the sound of a dog barking. like a large dog. And so you'd go to these quarter-inch tapes and you'd spool down and you'd press play, and then the client would say, no. And then you'd have to unspool it all and put it back in its box and go to the next one and then say, oh, yes, I like that one. And then that would be transferred from quarter-inch to 35 mil or to another quarter-inch, or if you were really modern at that point, it was DAT tape. So that was my first foray into the post-production side, and so I never really got into the music side. That's originally what I wanted to do, and I did the course for a year to get into music, but by accident I kind of fell into I started at the bottom rung of the ladder doing post-production sound, and I'm obviously very thankful that I did, but at the time it was music that I wanted to get into, not post-production sound.
So did you struggle with that decision then? Because music was your first love? No,
it was just something. I guess I was just so young, and I was just so happy to be working. It was, and also, the late '80s, early '90s is when the money started falling out of all the great recording studios that were in London. They all started closing down anyway. The great studios like Psalm West and Psalm East Studios and all these kind of amazing places, because the home recording market was taking off, and it was taking a huge chunk of money. It wasn't the fact that people weren't buying records or singles because of the streaming. It was the fact that everyone was being able to make it was the rise of dance music and home sampling, and people were having big successes in the charts with records that they'd made at home. So a lot of those grand music studios ended up closing down. So I was aware that was happening, and so I figured it was a good idea to get into a slightly different aspect of the industry as opposed to trying to be in a music studio.
What was the first film that you worked on? Or did you work in television first before?
Well,
film?
No, I was actually pretty a bit of stuff that you would never know of. The first thing that I could say to you, which was very, very early on in my career, and I was very lucky to do it, which you may know of, is Leaving Las Vegas, which was the Mike Figgis directed movie starring Nicolas Cage.
Right,
and that was it's a great movie, and that was kind of by chance, because the picture editor of that movie, who was a commercials editor, I used to do sound effects for him, and he had never cut a feature film at that point, and Mike Figgis, the director, had done lots of commercials, and he had done this movie a few years earlier called I think it was An Officer and a Gentleman, where he had decided he didn't want to go the studio route. And he wanted to make a kind of personal movie and have it financed independently and not do it in an expensive way and not mix it in a big studio. And so he sought out these people that he'd worked with on various productions that weren't necessarily movie people, but people that he knew that could deliver what he wanted. So he used John Smith, who was the picture editor, who had never done a movie before, and he used me, who had equally done very little in the way of movies, but he knew he knew I was capable of doing the work, and it was great because not only was it an amazing movie, but it got recognition, and it got nominated for a couple of Academy Awards. So that was the first real thing that I had been involved with that had commercial success.
What a wonderful way to start your career!
Yeah, I mean,
that was a great movie.
I'd hate for people to think that the first thing I did was that. It wasn't at all. I'm talking a few years down the line, and after that as well, I did plenty of stuff that nobody ever saw, very kind of art house movies that I'd spend 6 months of my life working on, and my family would say, "What are you working on?" And I'd tell them, and they'd never hear about it. But that was definitely one of the first things that I did that resonated with people outside of my industry.
Well, the good news is you've been able to continue to work. Even then you were working on. It sounds like you're constantly working and honing your skills, even if those movies were never really heard of. Anytime we do anything, we always are learning our craft and getting better at it. And so,
totally, I'm a big believer in that. Actually, you never stop learning, and I think you're stupid if you do. And the great thing about my job is every movie is different, and it has its own set of challenges. And I would love to say to you that I approach every movie knowing exactly what I'm going to do and exactly how to do it, but I'd be lying. And you figure it out as you go through the weeds, as you say. So, and at the end of it, whatever you've learned, put it in your back pocket and roll it forward to the next job.
Good advice. Good advice. Well, we're going to be back after these brief messages. You are listening to The Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk 1460 and 101 FM. And like The Jan Price Show on Facebook and check out thejanpriceshow.com.
Have you ever dreamed of doing commercials or movies? Your dream starts with a desire. And if you have the desire to do commercials and feature films, we want to know about you. We're Moco Film, one of the Genesis companies that includes VoiceJock, a major provider of TV commercial talent to TV stations throughout the nation. Registering is free. Just go to mocofilm.com and fill out the information. That's MOCOfilm.com. You'll become part of a large talent bank available to producers. Go to mocofilm.com today and start living your dream.
Tired of looking at your worn wood floors? Mr. Sandless can bring them back to life again. That's right, it's Mr. Sandless, the no sanding solution to beautiful wood floors. Mr. Sandless is clean, efficient, contains no harmful chemicals, and is certified green. Mr. Sandless refinishes all hardwoods, softwoods, engineered flooring, and laminates. Most jobs are completed in one day with no cleanup required ever, with virtually no odor, and is safe for pets and kids. No need to move out or even leave the house. Mr. Sandless is the company that invented Sandless Refinishing and is the largest floor refinishing company in the world. Over 120,000 happy customers, guaranteed adhesion, guaranteed satisfaction, and a 5-year warranty. Call Mr. Sandless today at 831-747-7476. That's 747-7476. Or MrSandless.com. That's MrSandless.com.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
We are back, and my guest today is award-winning sound designer Julian Slater. Julian, after leaving Las Vegas, what did you do next after that?
Well, so at that point, I had my own facility. I kind of co-started a post-production facility in London when I was pretty young, actually. I was 21, 22, and we started off with 3 members of staff, me and my business partner being 2 of them, and we spent the kind of next 16 years building that facility up. So we had a mixture of TV and movie clients. So we used to do things like, TV-wise, there was a lot of British TV called Life on Mars, and I think it was known over here as MI5, and Downtown Abbey. That was another thing that my facility did, which I didn't really get too involved in. I was kind of more concentrated in the film side. So, we did things like In Bruges, for example, and through Edgar's first movie, which was Shaun of the Dead, which then obviously went on to thankfully doing all of Edgar's movies. The Girl with the Pearl Earring was another one. So it was great because it was not just one particular type of movie that I worked on. It was a variety of different kind of genres. So I'd like to think my CV is peppered with a wide mixture of different things, and not just necessarily action movies or period movies, or a wide variety. So. Yeah, I spent the next 16 years building up, I guess, my career, but also the facility. And I eventually decided to leave and get out and do my own thing. But that kept me busy for a good 16 years.
I'll say it sounds like it, and it makes it more interesting when you're doing a variety of different things. So, just so for our listeners, describe what a sound designer. And I know you wear many hats. You're on Baby Driver, which we're going to talk about. You were the supervising sound editor, re-recording mixer, and the sound designer. So maybe you want to get into what those are, each of those different categories or job descriptions.
Yeah. So So I guess I wear three hats is the way I would describe it. Sound designer, supervising sound editor, and re-recording mixer. And depending on the production is kind of dependent on which one of those hats I wear at any given time, or if I just wear one of them on that movie. More often than not, I'm just finishing a movie now that I'm just the re-recording mixer on, but on the movies where I like to really get stuck in and get my hands dirty, I wear all three of those hats. So sound designer, that the term of itself can mean a whole variety of different things, but to me it is someone who creates new sounds from scratch. And they can be weird and wonderful sounds like spaceship paths or whooshes or earthquake rumbles or a whole variety of different weird and wonderful sounds. But it can be other things as well. It can also mean a sound designer could be someone who understands about taking sounds away at different times. So for me, the sound designer is someone who will build from the ground up 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 different groups of sounds and sound effects that didn't exist before, either by manipulating existing sounds or by creating something completely from scratch. So that's a sound designer. As a supervising sound editor, my role is I essentially run the crew, the sound crew. So I always think I kind of have two responsibilities. I have a responsibility to the producers and to the studio, because at the beginning of the job I will agree to do it for a certain price, and my job really is to keep it within that price, within that budget, unless the goalposts change later on down the line and I have to act and react accordingly. But I have to be responsible, fiscally responsible to the producers and to the studio, and then also to the director. So my job is to liaise with the director throughout the course of the post period, which could be, depending on the scale of the movie, it could be, sometimes it's like 5 or 6 weeks if it's really, really micro budget, or it could be 7 or 8 or 9 months, or even longer. I just finished Jumanji, and that was like 10 or 11 months. But it's to work with the director and to at least help them realize what it is that they are thinking for the soundtrack of that movie. And at best, it is to go further than that and to improve and to show them things that they didn't think were capable of, and to push those boundaries and to suggest ideas and help expand their idea of what is capable and possible on their movie. So that's the supervising sound editor, and I'll work closely with the director, and then I will then go off and be the conduit quite often between the director and the various members of my sound crew. So that's the supervising sound editor aspect, and then there's the re-recording mixer aspect, which is sitting on that mixing desk more often than not with a co-mixer and taking all those elements, and there are thousands of elements and hundreds of audio tracks, and sitting there for weeks and blending those with all the various different elements. So, for example, and you can do that with different disciplines. So there's dialogue, there's music, there is the sound effects, and there's Foley, which is all the footsteps and stuff. And so, depending on the movie, I'll take, like in the movie I'm doing right now, I'm the re-recording mixer, and I'm taking care of the dialogue and the music. On Baby Driver, I took care of the effects and the music because the two were so entwined. And on Jumanji, for example, I took care of the effects and the Foley. So even within that one title of re-recording mixer, what I actually do very much depends on job to job to job.
It really sounds intricate too. I mean, it sounds like you really have to be obviously very detail oriented. I would say, to do something like this. Would that be the case?
Yeah, it's funny because at home, as my wife will attest, I'm terrible at remembering things. I kind of switch my brain off, and I'm not the most together person.
Does she say that you don't listen to her?
I wouldn't. I'll leave that up to interpretation. But I'm certainly not a kind of detailed person in my kind of everyday home life.
Isn't that interesting?
But as soon as I go into work, there is something that happens in my brain, and I become incredibly detailed, and I remember everything, and it's like a very large detailed jigsaw puzzle that I can just see and remember. But it is, you know, there's a lot of balls that I have to keep in the air whilst I'm juggling, because it's like I say, it's looking after the financial aspect, it's the creative aspect, it's managing, because I may have a crew of like 6 or 7 or 8 people, and you've got to look after them and make sure that they're being looked after, but they're also doing the jobs that you need them to do. And so yeah, it at times can be a very complicated role, but you know, it's something that I thoroughly enjoy doing.
It's like, you know, just laser focus. You just like turn on a switch, it sounds like, when you get to work, and just can be there and be present to that. And maybe that's why you shut off when you get home.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think I must have said this to my wife at some point. You know, because I switch on when I get into work. I focus so much, and they're long days. You know, sometimes they can be really long days. And so when I get home, you know, if I have a weekend at home, my brain, that muscle memory just relaxes, and I kind of go into a bit of a different mode. But that's not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. It makes some sense to do that. You have to refresh so you can get back into the studio and do it again.
Right? Yeah.
We're going to be right back after these brief messages. You're listening to The Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk 1460 and 101 FM. And like The Jan Price Show on Facebook, and check out thejanpriceshow.com.
Do you have difficulty falling or staying asleep? Do you suffer from snoring, sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, or other sleep disorders? If so, we can help. Call Monterey Bay Sleep Center and arrange a sleep study in one of our luxury suites. We specialize in diagnosing and treating sleep disorders so you can regain your quality of life. Our luxury suites feature hotel-quality beds and flat-panel TVs so that you feel most comfortable during your stay. Call us today to arrange a sleep study at our secure facility in Monterey.
Call 831-920-1411. That's 831-920-1411.
The Ozio Theater in downtown Monterey is now open every day, showing independent and foreign films. The Ozio Theater has new concession offerings, including beer, wine, hard cider, and their homemade Lush Slush. You can now schedule private event screenings for community charity events, birthdays, anniversaries, or just a fun gathering of friends. For more information, visit the Ozio Theater online at oziotheater.com.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
We are back, and my guest today is award-winning sound designer Julian Slater. So that leads us into Baby Driver. Let's talk a little bit about how you took the audience on a sonic journey with Baby Driver, which the show will air after the Oscar nominations. I'm going to say this, I've never said this before, but you are an Oscar contender for creating the beautiful sound design of Baby.
I wince when I hear that, Jan, to be honest with you.
Sorry.
I mean, I will see. You know, one thing that does seem to have happened since Baby Driver came out is my peers have been very receptive to the work that was done on it, and I do believe that it was. I knew at the time when we did it, it was stuff that kind of hadn't been done before. But talk of Academy noms and stuff, just we'll put that to one side for the moment.
Okay, but I will say that you were nominated for a BAFTA award, which is the British version of our Oscars over here. That's exciting.
Yes, that is exciting. And again, it's you know, to be recognised by one's peers is, of course, you know, it warms my heart. It really does. You know, it's a funny thing that I do. You know, because I and my fellow team spend hours and hours in a dark room, kind of coming up with stuff and working on stuff, and it gets released, and more often than not, you don't get feedback on it. It's just a question of the numbers that, you know, either the Rotten Tomatoes reviews it gets or the numbers it does at the box office, but you don't really get feedback from people so much, you know. But with Baby, it's connected with a lot of people, and the feedback I've had has been like awesome, like truly awesome. You know, people who I don't know within the industry have sought me out to pass on their well wishes.
And,
So yeah,
and the music is, I mean, the sound is extraordinary in this movie. I mean, it's so much a character almost in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Edgar describes it as such, but I like to think of it as a character in the movie, you know, and you know, I'm very lucky to work with a director like Edgar, because he's a director who thinks about sound, who cares about sound, and he's aware of what sound is capable of adding to the overall movie-going experience when you see a movie and listen to a movie. You know, and he wrote, you know, sound is in the DNA of the script of Baby Driver. You know, the sound design and the sound mix in as much as the actual music choices that he used. So the thing that we wanted to do with Baby Driver was to, when the audience watches that movie, is to experience what Baby is experiencing in his world. And we do that with a whole variety of tools, as it were. You know, there's the syncopation of the everyday, the diegetic sounds with the music. So, you know, and he listens to music most of the time because he suffers from tinnitus. So, yeah, and it's been done in movies before to a small degree, but never for a whole entire movie. So, you know, what I was saying earlier about, you know, approaching a movie and not knowing exactly how to do it, that was very much the case with Baby Driver. I was brought on very early on in the process. I mean, I spoke with Edgar before the shoot, and I was brought on in, say, week 3 of week 4 of the director's cut, which is very early for someone like me. And you know, I sat down and watched the first 2.5 reels, because that's as far as Edgar had got with his cut. And I remember viscerally shaking, because I was shaking at I could see the potential of what Edgar was trying to do. So I was shaking kind of with excitement, but I was also shaking a bit with fear, because I didn't know how to do it, because it was something that had never been done before, and thus, you know, I didn't know how to approach it. So yeah, it's definitely something that I feel is a unique thing, and for regular people who aren't in the industry, you know, like someone's mum, to go and see a movie and come out and say, yeah, I really noticed the sound on that. That for me is like, that's just a huge kind of compliment. You know, that's great.
Well, it is, and I mean, it's such, as you said, it's a character in the movie. You know, how can you describe a little bit how it was woven? The sound design was woven to each piece of the music, including how the police sirens blast in tune with the guitars and gunshots and beat and time with the drums and the riffs and more. Get into that a little bit, because that was really truly amazing and very unique.
Yeah, so stop me if I start getting too technical and getting too boring.
Okay.
So throughout the movie, most things of sound design, even though you probably do not pick up on it on its first watching, are syncopated to the music that he's listening to at the time. So that runs from car engines to police sirens to bank alarms, to dogs barking, to train horns, to you know, it's all syncopated. And again, going back to what I was saying, I'd never done that before, and I didn't know how to do that. So what we did was, first of all, every piece of music was tempo maps, which means that it's given a click track throughout the entirety. Most of those music cues are not just bits of the music, the bits of the song; they're the whole song throughout. And so the movie starts off with this piece of music called the John Spencer Blues Explosion, this track called Bell Bottoms. And so first thing you do is you map out the tempo. First of all, let me say, we normally work in the UK, where I was until 4.5 years ago. We work in time code. In the industry in America, we work in feet and frames. For this, we kind of had to work in bars and beats, because we had to work in a musical way. So we tempo map the piece of music, And once we've identified the tempo, we then map the tempo of whatever the sound effect is or sound design is to that tempo. Now, that's easier for things that are quick and short, like a car skid or something that is over just like 3 seconds long. But you mentioned the police sirens. Those police sirens in that first car chase are pretty much throughout the whole sequence. And if you've got a tempo of a piece of music that is not constant like the John Spencer piece is, the tempo isn't just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It kind of goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you're going to match that tempo, the siren it works musically and it's in sync, but it's going all over the place. It's kind of, instead of just going up, it's going crazy fast at sometimes, and it just doesn't work. So we had to figure out a way to, in the mix, you hear all these sounds when they are working musically, but if they're not working cinematically and don't sound believable, we then take them out of the mix. So the mix is this constant kind of pushing and pulling of all these different elements depending on whether they work. And that's kind of how we did the whole movie. You know, every sound effect was tempo mapped and pitched to work and time stretched to work with the piece of music, which meant it worked musically, but then you listen to it and it doesn't necessarily sound believable, or it just doesn't sound great as a piece of audio. Or sometimes it works too musically and you can't distinguish it from the music. So we would then have to take it out and pitch it down or make it a bit discordant or just replace the sound. It was there were like these check boxes that had to be checked. Does it work musically? Yes. Does it sound believable? Yes. Does it work and sound cool for cinema? Yes. Quite often, those 3 check boxes did not get checked every time, and so we just had to replace, pull the sound out and put it back in and rework it. So, yeah, when baby is listening to music and he's got it in his earbuds, all those diegetic sounds that you are hearing have kind of been worked to make it symphonic almost. It's kind of like a sound design symphonia.
Wow.
And let me say that's not that's kind. I can say that easily now because it took 7 months of figuring it out and speaking to people who are far more musical and far more advanced musically than I am, and now I can say it and it rolls off my tongue because I've done it. But that's why I was shaking when I first saw those 2.5 reels, because I'm like, how the earth do I do? How do I do it? Now it sounds easier.
Oh, now it sounds, so now you could just do this again without any problem, like with your
It
blindfolded.
will certainly be easier. Yes, it'll be easier. Yeah.
Do you think your initial desire to get into the music industry helped you at all when you were doing this film?
Yeah, I guess it did in some degree. I mean, I was very lucky. I should point out that. I feel I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky to be asked back by Edgar to keep doing his movies. And I'm very lucky to surround myself with people who are good people who are as professional as I like to think I am. And with regards to that musicality, I'm very lucky that... So Edgar's composer was Stephen Price, who is a good friend of mine. He used to be a music editor for years, and I worked with him when he was a music editor. And then he did one of his first composition gigs was a little movie called Gravity, and he won an Oscar and a BAFTA and got all this critical acclaim. And he went on to do Suicide Squad and Fury for David Ayer, and he's now a big time Hollywood composer. But the great thing is that he's still just my friend, and quite often when I come onto a movie, there's a lot of talk about me working closely with a composer, but it doesn't happen that often because they're busy doing their own thing, and you don't have an amazing relationship with them. But with Baby Driver, I really did. I'd go for Sunday lunch around at Steve's house, and every day I could phone him up and speak to him and say, how do you think it's the best way to do this? And I would send him my sound design, and he would pull it into his score and sometimes make adjustments, or he'd send me stuff, and it was a total cross-pollination. And that's actually pretty rare, I have to say. And and the great thing with working with Edgar, all of his crew are long-time collaborators. His two picture editors, John and Paul Matchless and John Amos, I've worked with for many, many years now. So, again, that kind of collaboration breeds a very fertile environment for ideas, because if you've got no hang-ups about suggesting something and thinking that someone's going to shoot it down, and you know that people are very receptive, you can throw out crazy ideas, knowing that even if they don't work, you're not going to get shot down. I think about it like going on a first date. If you go on a first date with someone, you're quite often not yourself. You're trying to convey a certain image of yourself until you get to know that person, and that's the kind of thing that doesn't happen when you work with long-time collaborators, because there are no barriers. You all know each other really well. You go and have a drink and have a meal with each other, and so that breeds this kind of great environment for throwing up sometimes crazy ideas that that not every time work, but quite often they work. So, for example, the tinnitus that's in the movie, which you hear throughout the movie, that came about through my dialogue editor, who is 10 years younger than me. We started off with just that high-pitched whistle that you're used to hearing in movies, like in Saving Private Ryan. And my dialogue supervisor said to me when we played it first in the cinema, he's like, dude, we can't have that. The audience are just going to be holding their ears the whole time. And so we came up with a whole variety of different ways to convey tinnitus that isn't necessarily high-frequency pitched whistles. So I could then go to Steve, the composer, and he would then, in certain areas, have held strings in his score that conveys the emotion of tinnitus, or tinnitus. We call it tinnitus in the UK. Tinnitus. And see, that's a great example of cross-pollination of ideas. It's my dialogue editor coming to me saying, I don't think this works, me being accepting of it because I've worked with him a lot of times, and then me going to the composer and him putting things in his score because of my suggestion. It's the best way to work.
Oh, it is, and it's very, obviously very collaborative, but there's a sense of trust that you have when you work with the same crew over. And I've talked to a lot of filmmakers, and I find very often they have certain crew members that they just love working with, like you with Edgar, and working with many of his films or most of his films. There's that sense of trust and knowing, and there's I would have to assume there's like a shorthand too when you work with people over and over again, that you don't have to get into all the details. You kind of understand each other's shorthand. Is that true?
Yeah, it's totally true. And what's kind of ironic about the Baby Driver specifically, so I now live in Los Angeles. I've lived here for 4.5 years, and I had spent a good 10 years wanting to come to LA. I feel like I'm the living embodiment of the American dream. I literally rocked up here, and for a variety of reasons, realized that I didn't know anyone here. I had no contacts. I'd left all my contacts in the UK. All my producers and editors that I'd worked with weren't here anymore, and I spent a good few years kind of scratching around trying to figure out where I could place, where I belonged in this amazing community, which, knock on wood, hopefully I think I've sorted. But Baby Driver had to be posted back in the UK for because of the tax breaks. So I actually went back to London, said goodbye to my wife and 2 kids for 7 months whilst I went back to London to do it. But I picked up with my original crew that I had worked with on all of Edgar's previous movies. So it was great because I literally just went straight back into that shorthand that you talk about. Dan, my kind of right-hand man and dialogue and ADR supervisor, when you've got 15 years of back history, even though you haven't worked with each other for 4.5 years, you just slip straight back into that. And it's great because when you have a team of people, everyone's got their strengths and their weaknesses. God knows I've got enough weaknesses. But when you know what everyone's strengths and weaknesses are, you can apply the task accordingly. So yeah, it was great. It was slightly weird that I was dipping back into working with people I hadn't worked with for many years, but it it didn't matter at all. Within day 2, it was like, I'd never been away.
It's like putting on an old, comfortable shoe.
Yeah.
when you are able to do that. We're going to be back after these brief messages. You are listening to The Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk 1460 and 101 FM. And like The Jan Price Show on Facebook and check out thejanpriceshow.com.
Tired of looking at your worn wood floors? Mr. Sandless can bring them back to life again. That's right, it's Mr. Sandless, the no sanding solution to beautiful wood floors. Mr. Sandless is clean, efficient, contains no harmful chemicals, and is certified green. Mr. Sandless refinishes all hardwoods, softwoods, engineered flooring, and laminates. Most jobs are completed in one day with no cleanup required ever, with virtually no odor, and is safe for pets and kids. No need to move out or even leave the house. Mr. Sandless is the company that invented Sandless Refinishing and is the largest floor refinishing company in the world. Over 120,000 happy customers, guaranteed adhesion, guaranteed satisfaction, and a 5-year warranty. Call Mr. Sandless today at 831-747-7476. That's 747-7476 or MrSandless.com. That's MrSandless.com.
Have you ever dreamed of doing commercials or movies? Your dream starts with a desire. And if you have the desire to do commercials and feature films, we want to know about you. We're Moco Film, one of the Genesis companies that includes VoiceJock, a major provider of TV commercial talent to TV stations throughout the nation. Registering is free. Just go to mocofilm.com and fill out the information. That's MOCOfilm.com. You'll become part of a large talent bank available to producers. Go to mocofilm.com today and start living your dream.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
We are back, and my guest today is award-winning sound designer Julian Slater. Julian, you've mentioned you've worked a lot with Edgar Wright, but you've also worked with, and I really want to get into some of these other directors. You've worked with Tim Burton, Joel Edgerton, and George Miller. And you worked with George Miller on Mad Max: Fury Road, in which you won the MPSE Golden Reel Award for part of that sound team. Tell us a little bit about working on that, because that was another one where sound was so important to the movie.
I mean, I do feel lucky that I've worked with some directors who do some pretty cool stuff, I have to say. God, I can't speak highly enough of George Miller. George is like an utter gentleman on the dub stage. He is the kind of director that, we work in reels, and, after we've done a pass on a reel, he would stand up from his chair and shake everyone by the hand and just thank everyone individually. But Mad Max, I mean, the first time I saw it, you obviously know that it's something completely different and something that it has the potential to sound amazing. My role on Mad Max was just one of the sound designers. So there was a team of us all working on those kind of vehicle sounds and all those kind of weird and wonderful explosions that were happening. That was just, again, it's kind of like one of those things you look back on your career and just realize you're lucky to work on, because it's something that is unique and distinct. And, I feel cinema is just a great kind of medium, because it's still in this 2018 world where everyone is like me, where I'm tied to my iPhone, and as soon as I get a moment of downtime, I'm on my iPhone. But in the cinema, I turn my phone off, and pretty much everyone turns their phone off, and they concentrate on an art form for, an hour and a half or 2 hours, which I think is very rare, and it doesn't happen hardly anywhere else in life. So I feel blessed to work on movies, and then to work on unique movies that are original, and, I'm not knocking number 5s and number 6 of movies at all, but when you look at someone like Edgar and look at someone like George Miller and look at someone like Tim Burton, these are people who do movies that are unique, whether they're not necessarily everyone's cup of tea all the time, but they're unique and they're original. And, I just feel blessed to be able to be part of those projects.
I agree with you that, one of the things I talk about a lot on this show is watching movies in the movie theater and, not streaming them and watching them at home, because you get too many distractions when you're at home.
Yeah.
And exactly, unplug. It does frustrate me every once in a while. Somebody will be on their phone and I'm like, I have to go, Sometimes
but it's pretty rare, right? You mean
it's very rare. It's rare.
It is rare. And I cannot think of any other gathering of people where people are focused and are not on their phones. Even at concerts now, everyone's got their phone and they're filming on the phones and not looking. So I think it's a very special thing still. And I hope it continues to flourish even when everyone is there's the Netflix and the Hulus and they're great. And I have Netflix. But when a movie comes out, I want to see it in a cinema.
Well, I do too, and I totally agree with you. And I certainly like a film like we're just talking about, Mad Max, Fury Road, and Baby Driver, to be able to see it in a movie theater with their sound system, which is far greater than anything we may have at home. It maximizes the whole experience for you.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, we did Baby Driver in this Atmos format, which is the format that has the speakers in the ceiling and all around you. And not, obviously, every cinema has that, but, we're acutely aware that we were going to be using sound to enhance the story. And, if anyone... A lot of people did get to see it in the cinema, and because of that, they had a real kind of connection to the movie, and in no small part because of the work that the sound design and mix, helped with the story. And so, as much as possible, we designed the soundtrack to be heard in that premium format. It's not to say it doesn't work when you hear it on TV or off your DVD player or for iTunes, but it's a different experience when you see it and hear it in the cinema.
It is a different experience. There's no question about it. And again, when we already talked about the sound is so much of a character in Baby Driver, it's just totally enhanced by experiencing it because you feel it. You feel it more. And I don't know, it's interesting because I don't know when we're watching a movie that we're really aware of the sound, that we pay that much attention to, all of the little pieces to it because it's such a part of the movie. And that's why with Baby Driver, it's such a big part of the movie that you have to see it. You should just see it. It's really a great story and fun and, greatly done. I don't know if they're talking about doing it and a sequel to this. Are they thinking about that?
I know as much as you. I genuinely know as much as you. I've read reports in various things that Sony have offered Edgar Baby Driver to. But I've been involved or potentially involved with so many movies that are at that stage and never happen. So I just whatever Edgar does next, I hope he asks me to work with him yet again because it will be, it'll be an amazing experience and it will be a unique and original piece of cinema, which is the kind of thing that I love doing.
It will, and I hope they don't call it Baby Driver 2. I hope they call it something else. But just so whenever they do something like that. Now, Mad Max, there was some talk about doing another sequel to that. Is that in the works? Do you know?
Again, to be honest, if I knew, I would probably say this, but I'm just being honest with you. I don't know what the deal is. I know George has talked about it, and I know George had many ideas. I mean, even every vehicle that those guys were driving in Mad Max had its own backstory. I mean, George had a Bible of these kind of printed documents and pictures and descriptions of the cars and even what the cars and vehicles' backstory was.
Wow.
So George had, I think George planned this movie for 10 years, or for that movie for 10 years. And I know he had ideas I had ideas for the next one, but a movie like that is a huge undertaking. It really is. Every movie is a huge undertaking, but something like Mad Max, I guess George, and again, if he wants to do it again, he wants to do it right. So,
Exactly.
it'll take some time, I'm sure, if the next one does come out.
Yeah, and again, lots of preparation, just what you're talking about. We're going to be back after these brief messages. You're listening to The Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk 1460 and 101 FM. And like The Jan Price Show on Facebook and check out thejanpriceshow.com.
Do you have difficulty falling or staying asleep? Do you suffer from snoring, sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, or other sleep disorders? If so, we can help. Call Monterey Bay Sleep Center and arrange a sleep study in one of our luxury suites. We specialize in diagnosing and treating sleep disorders so you can regain your quality of life. Our luxury suites feature hotel-quality beds and flat panel TVs so that you feel most comfortable during your stay. Call us today to arrange a sleep study at our secure facility in Monterey.
Call 831-920-1411. That's 831-920-1411.
The Ozio Theater in downtown Monterey is now open every day, showing independent and foreign films. The Ozio Theater has new concession offerings, including beer, wine, hard cider, and their homemade Lush Slush. You can now schedule private event screenings for community charity events, birthdays, anniversaries, or just a fun gathering of friends. For more information, visit the Ozio Theater online at oziotheater.com.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
We are back, and my guest today is award-winning sound designer Julian Slater. And Julian, we just have a few minutes left, but I do want to ask you about Tim Burton, who I just adore, his movies. And what was it like working with him, and what did you work with him on?
So I worked on a movie called Dark Shadows for him. I think that was about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was an utter career highlight. I mean, I grew up. I remember that first Batman movie that he did with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, and that's like I am truly thankful for what I do. I'm amazed that I can earn a living from what I do. It's something that I love doing, and then to find yourself working with someone like Tim Burton is, it's a proper pinch yourself moment. Tim is really he's a very chill director. He doesn't blow hot or cold. He's very calm. He respects the art of what you're doing and kind of lets you get on with it. So he'll present you with a framework and say these are my ideas, but he doesn't want to micromanage you. So he lets you go off and have a play, and he's happy to let you experiment. And again, it's one of those. Tim Burton is he's a brand. He's a style. He's not just a person. So. Yeah, I loved working with him. I would love to work with him. We've come close to working again together, and I would love to, because he's one of these guys that everything he does is, again, it's going back to the unique and original mantra. He comes up with new and original stuff
each time, even though you know when you're watching a Tim Burton film, it's a Tim Burton film, but it's still unique and original. And so how he keeps doing that is pretty awesome and amazing in itself, in its own right. Julian, this has been a wonderful hour. I've loved talking with you. It's fascinating, and I would love to have you back on the show.
I'd love to come back, and thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. You've been listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk 1460 and 101 FM, and like the Jan Price Show on Facebook, and check out thejanpriceshow.com.